We're not cutting you off, Elise. We just need to prioritize someone with real potential. That's what my dad said the night I asked for help paying my last semester of rent. Not a stranger. Not a landlord. My own father. I'm Elise Monroe, 24, and if you've ever wondered what it's like to be the shadow behind someone else's spotlight, well, that was my life growing up. My brother Daniel was the golden child. He always had that easy charm that drew people in, the kind of confidence that could convince a teacher to bump his grade with a smile and a joke.
Me?
I was the quiet one. I got straight A's without being asked, never missed a curfew, and somehow managed to become invisible anyway. Growing up in a 3-bedroom ranch-style home in Ashland, Oregon, things always looked normal from the outside. My dad owned a small tech consultancy business, and my mom worked part-time as a medical transcriptionist from home. Bills were paid. Groceries showed up. Christmas gifts were modest but thoughtful. Or at least, they were until Daniel turned 14 and started his business ventures. It started with a drone company in middle school, then a gaming app in high school, and by the time he hit 18, he was calling himself a serial entrepreneur. I once heard my mom say, "Daniel's going to be our retirement plan." She laughed, but I didn't, because even at 16, I understood what that meant. All bets were on him. Meanwhile, I worked part-time at the library, took dual-credit college courses, and spent weekends volunteering at the animal shelter. Not because anyone told me to, but because I thought it would matter. Spoiler alert, it didn't. When senior year rolled around, I applied to Oregon State for environmental engineering. I got in, with scholarships covering 70% of tuition. When I showed my parents the acceptance letter, beaming, my dad said, "That's great, Elise. Have you looked into financial aid for the rest?" My stomach dropped. "I thought you'd help with the rest. You've always said college was non-negotiable." He didn't meet my eyes. Daniel's business is going through a crucial phase. We're investing in his potential right now. But you're practical. You'll figure it out. My mom offered a weak smile. Your independence is something we've always admired.
And that's when it hit me.
I wasn't a daughter. I was a contingency plan. Just in case Daniel's dreams didn't pan out, I was the stable one. The one they could count on not to ask for much. I didn't fight. I didn't scream. I nodded and quietly filled out loan applications. By the time I moved onto campus, I was juggling 3 part-time jobs, waitressing at night, tutoring high schoolers, and working in a lab on weekends. I had no social life,
No time.
and no support. Meanwhile, Daniel launched a tech wellness startup with $80,000 from our parents, complete with a downtown loft and brand new MacBook Pro. But I kept going. Until my junior year. That's when everything finally cracked. After a brutal winter and losing one of my jobs, I couldn't afford rent anymore. I couch surfed for a month, then finally moved into my car, an old Honda Civic with a broken heater and a back seat full of textbooks. I didn't tell anyone. Not my roommates, not my professors, and definitely not my parents. I couldn't stomach another round of "you'll figure it out." But I did tell someone. Grandma Jean. My mother's mother. 82, fiercely independent, sharp as a tack. She'd always had a soft spot for me. Every birthday, she sent me handwritten cards and warm wool socks. When I was little, she'd tell me, "You're the kind of woman who plants gardens where people see concrete." When she called me one cold night in February, I was parked behind the Student Union Center with a blanket wrapped around my legs and a half-eaten protein bar for dinner. "Elise," she said, alarm creeping into her voice. "Why do you sound like you're outside?" I try to play it off. "Just taking a break." Long night of studying. She wasn't buying it. "Elise Monroe, don't you dare lie to me." And just like that, the dam broke. I sobbed, confessing everything. How I hadn't had a warm bed in weeks, how I showered at the campus gym, how I ate from vending machines between shifts, and how my parents knew I was struggling but had other priorities. She was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was calm, deadly calm. "Pack your things. I'll be there in 3 hours." I tried to protest, but she hung up. 3 hours later, headlights cut through the campus parking lot. Grandma Jean stepped out in her powder blue Buick, wearing a wool coat and leather gloves like she was heading into battle. She took one look at me, hollow-eyed, pale, shivering, and pulled me into a hug that smelled like lavender and peppermint. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart," she whispered. "This ends now." I didn't understand what she meant, not then. But 3 days later, after I moved into her cozy bungalow and finally slept in a real bed, I heard her on the phone. "No, Margaret, don't you, Mommy. You let your daughter live in her car while you bought Daniel a second office space? Shame on you."
Pause.
"No, I don't want her justifications. I want receipts.
Pause.
Because I'm changing my will, effective immediately." And that, my friends, was just the beginning. Before we continue, take a moment to let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe to more powerful stories like this one. I stayed at Grandma Jean's for over a week after that phone call, longer than I'd planned. She made space for me instantly, both in her home and in her routines. Her spare bedroom became my sanctuary. Clean sheets, a functioning heater, hot meals that didn't come from a vending machine. I didn't realize how starved I was for normalcy until she set a steaming plate of scrambled eggs in front of me, and I burst into tears. She didn't ask too many questions right away. Instead, she let me rest,
Heal.
get warm again. But the phone calls? Those started immediately. I wasn't sure who she talked to first, my mother or my father, but I heard snippets through the paper-thin walls. Her voice was clipped and razor-sharp, like she was carving through years of lies with each word. "You made her feel like a burden? A girl with 3 jobs and a 4.0 GPA.
Pause.
Don't you dare talk to me about Daniel's potential. Potential doesn't justify negligence." I asked her one morning as we folded laundry, "Do you think they'll actually hear you?" She looked at me over the rim of her glasses. "I'm not calling to ask them for anything, Elise. I'm calling to tell them I'm done pretending they didn't fail you." That was the thing about Grandma Jean. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her presence alone commanded attention. And now that attention was directed squarely at my parents. But even as she rallied around me, part of me still hesitated to believe I deserved it. Years of being quietly sidelined had done a number on my sense of worth. It didn't matter how many scholarships I won or how well I planned my future. At the end of the day, I was always the one they trusted to get by with less. Less praise, less support, less love, if I'm being honest. I kept waiting for a text from my mom, a call, anything. But days passed. Nothing came. Not even a "how are you holding up?" The silence hurt more than any yelling ever could. On the 7th day of living with Grandma Jean, she handed me a small envelope after dinner. Her handwriting looped neatly across the front. "For when you're ready." Inside was a business card. An attorney's office. "What's this?" I asked, heart thudding. She took a sip of her tea before answering. "I'm changing the terms of my estate. I want you to be involved in that conversation. It's not just about money. It's about correcting what should have never gone this far." I shook my head. "Grandma, I don't want your money. I want answers." "You'll get them," she said gently. "But you'll also get what's fair." I spent my whole life trying to make sure my family had choices. And you've had nothing but survival mode. The following morning, we drove to the law office. It was small, tucked between a bakery and a hardware store, but the meeting felt enormous. The attorney was a gray-haired woman with a kind smile and a fire behind her eyes. "Miss Monroe," she said, nodding at me, "your grandmother has made some decisions that I fully support. But before we continue, she wants you to see something." She slid a folder across the desk. Inside were financial disclosures. And not just from Grandma Jean. From my parents. Accounts. Transfers. Real estate. There it was, black and white proof that my family wasn't struggling when they told me they couldn't help with college. Quite the opposite. They had liquid assets in the 6 figures. A second home in Bend, Oregon, listed under a Shell LLC. Business investments. A trust fund for Daniel. And the most insulting piece? A recent $30,000 contribution to Daniel's startup for something labeled brand relaunch. $30,000. The same semester I was choosing between food and rent, they were giving my brother tens of thousands to rebrand. I felt nauseous. I don't understand, I muttered, flipping page after page. Why wouldn't they just tell me they couldn't help? Why lie? Grandma Jean placed a hand over mine. Because it was never about what they couldn't do. It was about what they chose not to do for you. That's when it clicked. They didn't say no to me because they were broke. They said no because, to them, Daniel was an investment. I was a write-off. I left that office with a new resolve. No more excuses. No more hoping they'd wake up and realize what they'd done. They knew. They'd always known. And they did it anyway. That night, while Grandma Jean slept, I sat on her porch wrapped in a blanket and stared out at the quiet street. The ache in my chest was no longer confusion, it was clarity. For the first time, I saw my parents for who they really were. And I knew I needed to confront them. But I wouldn't do it alone. Next time, I wouldn't be the daughter begging for scraps of love. I'd be the woman walking in with truth and backup. Because Grandma Jean had only just begun. Grandma Jean didn't waste time. The very next morning, she stood in the kitchen flipping blueberry pancakes like nothing was wrong, except for one small detail, the cordless phone tucked between her shoulder and ear. "Yes, Margaret," she said calmly. "We'd love to come to dinner Friday night. Elise will be joining me." My stomach dropped mid-sip of orange juice.
What?
She ended the call before answering, then turned to me, unbothered. "We're going to dinner. Grandma, I'm not ready to sit across from them. Not after what we found." "You won't be sitting across from them, sweetheart," she said, sliding a pancake onto my plate. "You'll be sitting beside me." That made me pause. Because when Grandma Jean said something like that, it wasn't metaphorical. It was a promise. Still, the anxiety clung to me all week like static. I tried to keep busy. I cleaned her garage, helped digitize her recipe cards, reorganized the sewing room she hadn't used in years. Anything to keep from picturing that dinner table. Their faces. The lies. Friday arrived too fast. I wore the one nice outfit I had left that didn't smell like diner grease or coffee grounds, black slacks, a forest green blouse, and flats that pinched my toes. Grandma, by contrast, looked like a general going into battle. Long gray coat. Pearls. Her hair pulled into a tight French twist. She drove in silence, save for one sentence halfway there. "They're going to lie, Elise. That's what guilty people do. But I won't let them bury the truth." The Monroe house hadn't changed. Same porch swing. Same flower beds. Same wreath on the door from last year's holiday season. But it felt different. Smaller somehow. Darker. The door opened before we even knocked. My mom stood there in her usual soft cardigan and slacks, wearing that hostess smile she used when guests came over. "Elise," she said, "it's so good to see you. Come in, come in. Dinner's almost ready." Her voice was smooth, practiced, like we hadn't gone radio silent for weeks. Like she hadn't let her daughter live in a freezing car while funding her son's rebrand. I stepped past her without a word. The dining room was already set. Candles lit. China plates. Fancy cloth napkins folded into triangles. My father sat at the head of the table, scrolling on his phone. He looked up when we entered, his face unreadable. "Elise," he said. "Glad you're here. You look well." It was the way people say you look well when they haven't noticed you in years. Like they're guessing. "Thanks," I said flatly, taking a seat. Grandma Jean sat to my right. Daniel strolled in a few moments later, grinning like he was about to pitch a new app. "Hey, little sis," he said, ruffling my hair before I could duck. "Didn't expect to see you here." I managed a tight-lipped smile. Guess I surprised everyone. He plopped down across from me and immediately started talking about how busy things were with his startup. New advisors. A round of potential seed funding. Maybe a feature in a local tech magazine. My parents hung on every word. "So," I asked, picking up my water glass, "what exactly does your company do now?" Daniel blinked. "I told you. Tech wellness. I raised an eyebrow. What does that mean exactly? He floundered for a second. It's like lifestyle optimization through AI. Apps that track emotional health, productivity, that sort of thing. Right, I said, setting my glass down. And it's doing well? My father chimed in quickly. He's building something remarkable. You should see the demo. Oh, I'd love to, Grandma Jean said sweetly, slicing into her roast chicken. Especially considering how much of your savings went into it. Silence. My mother cleared her throat. We've always supported both our children. No, Margaret, Grandma interrupted, her voice hardening. You didn't. The air turned brittle. Elise, my mother said, trying to change the subject. I heard you're staying with Grandma for a little while.
For now, I said.
It's nice having heat and a roof. Daniel frowned.
Wait.
What happened to your place? I didn't answer right away. I wanted them to feel it. The weight of the question they never asked. The guilt they never earned. I lived in my car for 3 months, I said finally, locking eyes with my mother. While you were buying Daniel an ergonomic office chair and LED lights for his brand relaunch. Her fork clattered to the plate. Elise.
No.
Don't talk. Just listen. I pulled the folder from my bag. The one from the lawyer's office. The one with the transfers. The investment. The trust fund. Everything. I saw the accounts. The second house. The money you said you didn't have. You didn't help me because you couldn't. You didn't help me because you chose not to. My father's face darkened. You had no right going through our records. And you had no right letting me drown, I snapped. Daniel shifted awkwardly. Whoa, okay, I didn't know any of this. Mom?
Dad.
They told you I didn't want help, I said, turning to him. That I insisted on doing it all on my own. Did they ever say I cried in the car some nights because I couldn't afford dinner? Or that I'd gotten so sick from the cold I couldn't walk straight for days? Daniel looked stunned.
No.
I didn't know. Grandma Jean folded her napkin neatly and set it beside her plate. I hope you're proud, she said, voice calm and steely. You've taught your daughter that love must be earned through suffering, and your son that success entitles him to everything. My mother stood abruptly. This isn't the place for this kind of talk. Grandma stood too. It's exactly the place. I followed her lead and rose from my seat, clutching the folder to my chest. I'm not asking for anything, I said, meeting my father's eyes. Not money, not apologies, just the truth. But no one spoke, not even Daniel. So I turned and walked out. Outside, the air was cold but clear. I breathed deeply for the first time in weeks. Did I do the right thing? I asked as Grandma Jean unlocked the car. She paused before answering. You told the truth. That's always the right thing. And as we pulled away from the house that had never really felt like home, I realized something. This wasn't the end.
It was just the first strike.
The car ride home was silent until we passed the county line. Then Grandma Jean exhaled, sharp, deliberate, like she'd been holding her breath since we left the table. You did what they never had the courage to do, she said. You told the truth with them watching. I nodded, but the adrenaline was fading fast, and in its place came something heavier, sorrow. Because even though I hadn't expected them to apologize, some part of me had hoped they might. Instead, I walked out of that house feeling like I'd set fire to a bridge they never intended to cross anyway. The next morning, my phone buzzed at 7:02 a.m. Daniel. I stared at the screen for a full minute before answering. Hello.
Elise.
His voice sounded hoarse, like he hadn't slept.
Hey.
Can we talk? In person. I'm not really in the mood for a TED Talk on startup culture right now. No, seriously. He hesitated. I didn't know any of it. About the car, the jobs, the cold. I swear, they made it sound like you wanted to go it alone. His voice cracked slightly. They lied to both of you, didn't they? The words stunned me. Because for the first time in forever, Daniel didn't sound arrogant or dismissive. He sounded ashamed. I'm at Grandma's, I said. You can come by. He arrived an hour later, looking like he'd aged a few years overnight. His usual clean-shaven face had stubble, and the branded hoodie he always wore looked like it had been slept in. Grandma gave us space and retreated to the garden. Daniel sat on the couch like someone waiting for a sentence to be handed down. "I spent half the night going through my bank statements," he said. "There are things in there I never authorized. My company account had deposits I thought came from investors. Turns out, they came from Mom and Dad." I finished. He nodded. "They told me they'd loan me 10 grand. It was more than 80. I folded my arms. "And while you were rebranding, I was eating crackers for dinner." He flinched. "I deserve that. Look, I know I've been clueless. I had it easy, and I didn't question it. That's on me." "Why now?" I asked. "Why care?" He looked up at me, and for once, his expression didn't carry that air of practiced charm. "Because I saw your face last night, and it looked like mine. When I found out." We sat in silence for a while. The only sound was the ticking of Grandma Jean's old wall clock. "I want to make it right," he said finally. "You can't unlive my 3 years in survival mode, Daniel." "I know. But I can at least stop living in the house of cards they built." Then he reached into his backpack and pulled out a manila folder. "I printed everything. All the transfers, account activity, anything that might prove what they did. If you ever want to take it further." My breath caught. He was giving me evidence. Not just sympathy. Not a vague promise to do better. Evidence. "Why are you really doing this?" I asked, narrowing my eyes. He didn't hesitate. "Because they lied to both of us. And because I want to be someone who earns what he gets from now on." That, more than anything, made me believe him. Grandma Jean returned just as Daniel stood to leave. She gave him a long look. "You woke up," she said simply. He nodded.
Late. But yeah.
After he left, I held the folder in my lap, staring at it. A paper trail of betrayal. With this, I could confront them. Or go public.
Or,
I could bury it. Let it rot where the lies started. I wasn't sure yet what to do. That decision would come later. For now, I had to focus on rebuilding the one life they hadn't managed to break. My own. That afternoon, Grandma Jean brought me a box from the attic. Dusty, sealed with masking tape. Labeled in her script, "Elise for someday." Inside were pieces of a girl I almost forgot I was. Childhood drawings. Honor roll certificates. A newspaper clipping from the local paper when I'd won a science fair in 9th grade. "You always stood out," she said softly, even when they wouldn't say it. I ran my fingers across a faded photo of me at age 11, holding a handmade wind turbine model in front of our garage. I remembered that day, how Daniel got bored halfway through helping and wandered off. How Mom didn't come outside. How Dad said, "That's cute," before heading back to his office. But Grandma had framed it. She'd saved all of it. Because I mattered to her, even when I didn't matter to anyone else. That night, I finally opened my laptop and updated my resume. I applied to 3 internships and 2 part-time positions, this time, ones that actually aligned with my engineering goals. Grandma Jean came up behind me and rested a hand on my shoulder. "Wherever you go," she said, "go with both feet. You don't owe them, you're limping." I smiled. For the first time in months, I felt like I was standing on solid ground. Because I wasn't alone. And because the girl who had once been invisible, she wasn't hiding anymore. The silence didn't last long. 3 days after Daniel handed me that folder, the retaliation began. It came quietly at first, a vague Facebook post from my mother that read, "Some people forget who raised them when it's convenient. Parents make sacrifices. Children twist them." No names. But I knew exactly who it was aimed at. A few of her friends commented with those usual empty platitudes. "Teenagers are so ungrateful these days." "You did your best, Margaret." I didn't respond. But my stomach twisted all the same. Because I wasn't some teenager who hadn't gotten her way. I was a young woman who'd survived the wreckage they called parenting. Then the phone calls started, first to Grandma Jean. They alternated between performative concern and veiled threats. We just want what's best for Elise, my mother said on speakerphone as we sat on the couch. But these accusations, this drama, it's not helping anyone. Grandma Jean snorted. What's not helping is that you let your daughter live in her car while your son had catered lunches for his startup. We've supported her in our own way, my father chimed in. She's always been independent. Stop calling negligence independence, I snapped, unable to hold back. You didn't support me. You ignored me and hoped I wouldn't complain. There was a long pause on the line. We think Elise should come home, my mother said suddenly. Just for a week or two. Recenter. Get away from all this negativity. I stared at the phone like it had grown horns. She's not going anywhere, Grandma Jean said before I could respond. And certainly not back to a house that only became concerned once their secrets were exposed.
Click.
The call ended without another word. We sat in silence for a long time after that, the cordless phone resting like a dead weight on the coffee table. They're scared, Grandma Jean said finally. That's why they're lashing out. I nodded. But something about the exchange stuck in my mind like a splinter.
Why now?
Why try to bring me back home after months of nothing? What were they afraid I'd do? Then, 2 days later, I found out. Daniel sent me a text. You're not going to believe this. Check your email. Attached was a forwarded message from my parents' lawyer to theirs. A preemptive legal statement. In it, they accused me of trespassing, violating their financial privacy, and most shockingly, attempting to coerce Daniel into transferring business assets. I stared at the screen, pulse racing. I hadn't done any of that. And Daniel? He'd voluntarily handed me those documents. If anything, he was the one who should have been questioning their use of his business accounts. The betrayal stung. But not from Daniel. No, his next message came seconds later. They're trying to corner you. I'm not backing them. I'll make that clear if it comes to it. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I walked outside into Grandma Jean's backyard and stood in the soft spring sun, trying to breathe past the tightness in my chest. I knew this wasn't over, but I didn't know it was going to go nuclear. That night, Grandma Jean made her own call to her attorney. They want to play games, she said calmly as she stirred tea in her favorite floral mug.
Fine.
Let's show them I kept records too. Apparently, she'd been documenting every conversation since the night I moved in.
Dates. Times.
Witnesses. Even a voicemail from my mother in which she'd all but admitted to controlling the family's educational fund in the way we thought was most efficient. Grandma was ready for war. But even amidst the chaos, life kept moving forward. One afternoon, while sorting mail, I found a cream-colored envelope addressed to me in thick handwriting I didn't recognize. No return address. Inside was a single-page letter. Dear Elise, you don't know me, but I knew your grandfather. Not Grandma Jean's husband. Your father's father. We served together in the Navy. I was also one of the first investors in his small hardware business in Portland before he sold it in the 90s. Your grandfather was a brilliant man, but more importantly, he was ethical. Before he passed, he set aside a special scholarship fund for his grandchildren. Not through your parents, but in a quiet trust handled by my firm. I just found out that your brother accessed his share through your parents years ago. Yours was never claimed. Let's fix that.
Please call me.
Robert Langley and Stein LLP. My breath caught in my throat. There was money. Money meant for me. Money they had kept hidden. Or worse, intentionally withheld. I showed the letter to Grandma Jean, who read it twice before setting it down slowly. They stole from their own father's legacy, she said quietly. And from you. A storm was building behind her eyes now, bigger than anything I'd seen before. Because this wasn't just about favoritism anymore.
It was theft.
Of inheritance. Of opportunity. Of truth. I called the number that afternoon. Mr. Langley's voice was kind, steady, and unmistakably professional. He explained that the trust had been small, around $40,000, left behind for each grandchild's first major adult endeavor. It was created when I was only 6. Daniel's portion had been requested and granted when he turned 19. Mine somehow had never been claimed. I asked who authorized Daniel's withdrawal. His pause was answer enough. Your parents signed for it, Elise, claiming you didn't intend to go to college. My hands trembled. They stole my education fund, and no one ever told me it existed. I want it released, I said. To me, not to them. Ever. He assured me it was possible, with proof of identity and a simple affidavit. I'll send the paperwork tonight, he said. As I hung up, I felt it like a distant drumbeat. This was far from over. But, for the first time, I had power, and I planned to use it. The affidavit was simple enough. I filled it out the next morning at Grandma Jean's dining room table, while she watched me with quiet pride, her tea cooling beside her.
Name.
Birth date. ID confirmation.
Signature.
Proof that I was, in fact, Elise Monroe, the intended recipient of a trust fund my parents had conveniently forgotten existed. By 2 p.m., it was notarized and overnight to Mr. Langley's office. A week later, the funds were officially transferred into a new account in my name. $42,013.76. It wasn't millions, but it felt like justice. And yet, I didn't spend a dime of it. Not yet. I needed time to think, to plan, to do what they never expected. Build something. Daniel came by later that evening. They know, he said, stepping inside, rubbing the back of his neck. About the trust. Let me guess, I said. They're furious. He nodded. They're calling it miscommunication, saying they were holding it until you were ready to use it responsibly. I almost laughed. Like when I was living in my car. Was that not responsible enough? I'm not defending them, he said quickly. Just warning you. They're scrambling. I hope they trip, I muttered. He didn't smile. Instead, he sat across from me and pulled out his phone.
They posted something.
It's getting traction. My stomach dropped. He opened Facebook and handed me the screen. There it was. A carefully crafted post from my mother's account, complete with a smiling family photo from 3 years ago. Parenting is never perfect. You try to raise your children with love and fairness, but sometimes one child chooses a path of resentment. We will always love Elise, even if she's chosen to believe the worst of us. We hope one day she remembers who stood by her all these years. Over 100 likes. Dozens of comments from people I barely knew anymore. Stay strong, Margaret. You were always such a caring mom. Teenagers go through rough phases. This generation is so entitled. Teenagers? I was 24, with 3 jobs, an engineering degree nearly complete, and trauma they had no idea how to spell, let alone carry. I stood up, chest tight. They're painting me as some bitter, unstable failure. Daniel nodded. They're scared you're winning.
They've never known how to deal with that.
I don't want to deal with them through social media games, I said. I want them to say it to my face. Daniel hesitated. There's something else. What? They're throwing a fundraiser next weekend. For Dad's consulting firm, they've expanded into nonprofit tech advising or something. A bunch of community leaders, donors, former clients. Media. I narrowed my eyes. And there's a rumor they're using the speech to address recent family rumors. Subtly, but it's meant to clean their image. I blinked. They're going to publicly rewrite history? Daniel looked miserable. I thought you should know before it blindsides you. I turned away from him and stared out the window. Spring had come in fast, and the garden Grandma Jean loved so much was in full bloom. Tulips, daffodils, bright colors everywhere. A thought hit me like a lightning bolt. What if I show up? I said. Daniel looked confused. To the fundraiser? I nodded. What if I don't let them control the story this time?
He blinked.
They'll never expect it. Exactly. Grandma Jean was quiet when I told her the plan that evening. She sipped her tea slowly and finally said, if you're going to walk into their arena, you need to be armed. With what?
Truth, she said.
But also grace. And control. You don't need to scream to be heard. You just need to be undeniable. The next Saturday, I put on the nicest outfit I owned, a navy blue sheath dress Grandma Jean had once bought me for mock interviews. Professional.
Sharp.
Unapologetic. Daniel met me outside the venue, a downtown conference hall with sleek glass doors and a red carpet flanked by planters. "You sure about this?" he asked. "Are you?" He gave a thin smile. "I told them I wouldn't speak tonight. I didn't say I wouldn't show up with the person they erased." We walked in together. My parents didn't see us right away. They were working the crowd, shaking hands, smiling. My mother wore a champagne-colored suit. My father looked like he always did, pressed and polished, full of charm that only went surface deep. As people took their seats, I hung back.
Watched.
Waited. The MC took the stage and introduced my dad. He stepped up to the microphone, holding a printed speech. The lights hit him just right. He smiled. "Thank you for being here tonight," he began. "This past year has been one of incredible growth, not just for our firm, but for our family. And while we've faced challenges, we've always believed in leading with integrity." My mother's expression shifted slightly when she spotted me in the back of the room. Her mouth opened, then closed. My dad hadn't seen me yet. He continued, "Being a parent is about making hard choices. Sometimes those choices are misunderstood. But we never stopped supporting our children, even if they didn't always recognize it." That was my cue. I stepped forward. Daniel at my side. The room turned. Eyes followed me like I was a ghost. But I wasn't. I was very, very real. My voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Then why did you spend my college fund and let me live in my car?"
Gasps.
Silence. My dad froze at the podium. My mom stood up from her table. "Elise," she said, "please, this isn't the time." "Isn't it?" I asked. "Because it was the time when you posted lies about me online. It was the time when you accused me of stealing. When you rewrote our family's history in a room full of donors." I turned to the crowd, hands steady. "My name is Elise Monroe. I'm an engineering student. I've worked 3 jobs for 5 years. My parents told everyone I was independent by choice. But they drained my trust fund. They funded my brother's company. And they left me out of everything."
Gasps again.
Whispers. "And yet I'm here. Not to destroy them, but to stop them from destroying the truth." Then I looked straight at my parents. "I don't want your money. I want my name back. My story. My dignity." And with that, I turned and walked out. The applause started slow, then louder. Behind me, not everyone clapped, but enough did. More than enough. Outside, Daniel caught up to me. "That," he said, breathless, "was the bravest thing I've ever seen." I didn't respond. I didn't need to, because for the first time in years, I felt free. I didn't sleep that night. Not from fear. Not from regret. But because my phone wouldn't stop buzzing.
Texts.
Emails. Social DMs from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Some were classmates. Some were strangers who had seen the footage. Because yes, someone had recorded the entire confrontation. From my walk down the aisle to the final line. "I don't want your money. I want my name back." And they posted it online. By morning, the clip had been shared across 3 platforms. Local news picked it up. A few smaller blogs ran with headlines like, "Daughter calls out parents for education betrayal at charity gala." "Engineering student exposes family favoritism in viral speech." "She lived in her car." "Her parents funded her brother's startup." Some comments were cruel, people assuming I was exaggerating or calling me ungrateful. But most were supportive, empathetic, outraged, even inspired. I sat in Grandma Jean's kitchen, scrolling in disbelief as the numbers climbed. Daniel came over mid-morning, carrying 2 coffees and a cinnamon twist. "You're trending locally," he said with a crooked grin. And I mean that in the least annoying way possible. I took the coffee, dazed. "What have I done?" "Spoken truth to power," he said. "Even if that power happens to be our parents." He paused, then pulled something from his pocket. A letter. Folded. "They sent this to me yesterday. Before the gala." I opened it slowly. It was typed formal. A contract. If Daniel agreed to publicly distance himself from me, release a statement framing the family tension as miscommunication, They'd reinstate full funding for his business and offer him controlling interest in a new investment vehicle under the family's name.
A bribe.
A betrayal in a single page. My stomach churned. "What did you say?" I asked. Daniel shrugged. "I told them I wasn't for sale." My chest tightened. He hesitated. "But they're furious, Elise. This video humiliated them. They're spinning." "They already spun everything for years," I said. "This time they just lost control." My email pinged again. New subject line. Inquiry. Speaking opportunity. Women in STEM Leadership Summit. I blinked. "Daniel," I said slowly, "they want me to speak. At a real summit. On women's education access." He leaned over to read the email. "That's incredible," he said. "You should do it." I hesitated. What if I'm not qualified? I mean, all I did was survive. He gave me a look. "You didn't just survive. You thrived with everything stacked against you. That's exactly what makes you qualified." And maybe he was right, because within 48 hours, I received 2 more emails, one from a community college requesting an interview for a mentoring role, and another from a national foundation offering a scholarship for resilient female engineers. For the first time in years, doors were opening. Not because someone opened them for me, but because I kicked them in. And then, just when I thought I might finally breathe, they came to the house. It was dusk. Grandma Jean was in the kitchen, humming as she watered the African violets. I saw the car first. Their silver Lexus. I stood frozen in the living room as the doorbell rang. 3 short chimes. Deliberate. Grandma beat me to the door. My mother's voice came through before it even opened fully. "We need to speak with Elise." Grandma stepped aside. I stayed where I was. They entered like they owned the air. My father wore his usual pressed polo. My mother looked tired, but she still had her makeup on, like she'd tried to present calm. "Elise," my father said, "we need to have a conversation. Privately." "No," I said. "If you've got something to say, you can say it in front of her." Grandma Jean folded her arms and stood silently, like a sentinel. My mother spoke first. "We've been publicly embarrassed. Your speech was full of exaggerations. You've damaged our reputation." I nearly laughed. My reputation was damaged when you let me sleep in a freezing car. My father's jaw clenched. "We admit mistakes were made, but this has gone too far." I raised an eyebrow. "You mean people finally know what you've done?" "This video, it's hurt us. Business deals have been postponed. Our friends are asking questions." "Good," I said flatly. My mother's voice cracked. "We're still your parents." "Parents don't choose one child and discard the other," I said. "You weren't parents. You were investors. Daniel got funded. I got forgotten." They stood in silence. Then my father reached into his coat pocket. An envelope. He set it on the table. Inside was a cashier's check. $50,000. "For what?" I asked, not touching it. "A gesture," he said. "An attempt to repair this." Quietly. "We suggest you take the video down. Decline the speaking offers. We don't want this to escalate further." I stared at the check. Then I looked up, my voice ice. "You think you can buy my silence?" Again. My mother took a step forward. "Elise, please. You're getting attention for the wrong reasons. No one will hire someone who attacks their own family." "I don't want to be hired by people like you," I said. "I want to be respected by people who know what resilience looks like." I reached out, picked up the check, and ripped it straight down the middle. My parents gasped. I tore it again. Then again. Tiny pieces fell to the floor, like confetti. "You don't get to rewrite the past," I said. "And you don't get to buy the future." My father turned red. "This will be your last chance, Elise. After this, you're cut off completely." I stared him down. "I've never been on, Dad. You cut me off the day you chose his business pitch over my education." The silence that followed was deafening. Then Grandma Jean spoke for the first time. "I think it's time you left." They didn't argue. They just turned and walked out, defeated by a daughter they underestimated one too many times. As the door clicked shut, I turned to Grandma. She smiled. "You're not just rebuilding your future," she said. "You're setting fire to every lie that tried to bury you." And, for the first time in my life, I believed her. The stage lights were warm. Not blinding, not harsh, just warm, like sunlight bottled into spotlights and aimed gently at my face. Rows of faces looked up at me from the auditorium. Some were students.
Some were scientists.
Some were educators or advocates. All of them were women or women adjacent, or allies who believed in a world where access to education wasn't a privilege, but a right. I stood at the podium, my note cards trembling slightly in my hand. I'd rehearsed this moment in front of Grandma Jean, in the mirror, even in the car ride here. But nothing prepared me for the emotion of actually being seen. I took a breath, then spoke. "My name is Elise Monroe. I am a fourth-year engineering student, a scholarship recipient, and a former barista, waitress, tutor, and library assistant, all at the same time." Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. "I am also someone who lived in her car. Not because I made a bad decision, but because the people who should have believed in me didn't." Silence settled again. "You see, my story isn't unique. That's what makes it powerful. I know there are women in this room who've also carried more weight than anyone should. You've been told your strength is an excuse not to support you, that your independence is a reason to leave you alone, that your success is evidence you didn't need help to begin with." Heads nodded across the rows. A few eyes shimmered. "But I'm here to tell you something. Needing support doesn't make you weak. Asking for help isn't shameful. It's human. And no one, no matter how high their GPA or how quiet their suffering, should have to earn love or opportunity." I paused, looked around the room, saw women leaning forward. "Today, I design things. Machines. Systems. But more than anything, I want to help design a world where no girl has to be strong just to survive." Applause. Not explosive, not wild, but honest. It built slowly and swept through the auditorium until the walls echoed with it. I stepped back from the podium, breath caught in my chest, not from nerves, but from a strange, beautiful relief. I was no longer invisible. After the panel, people came up to me. A woman from a scholarship foundation pressed a card into my hand. A tech startup founder asked if I'd ever considered internships in machine learning. A teenage girl with thick glasses hugged me and whispered, "You made me feel like I wasn't the only one." That meant more than all the applause in the world. Back at the hotel that night, I sat in bed with my laptop open, emails flooding in. A subject line jumped out. "Full ride MS Fellowship, Urban Systems Design." The firm I had interned with last year, now offering to sponsor a fully funded master's degree if I joined their new social infrastructure initiative after graduation. I gasped, covered my mouth, read the email twice, 3 times. It was everything I'd dreamed of and more. I looked across the room at Grandma Jean, who had insisted on attending the event even though she hated long car rides and conference food. "I got it," I whispered. She looked up from her crossword. "Got what?" "The offer. Full ride. Masters. Real job after." Her eyes welled. "Told you," she said, voice cracking. "People would see you when you stopped shrinking." I laughed and cried at the same time. She came over and hugged me, and for once, I let myself believe this was the start of something new. And then my phone rang. Unknown number. Late at night. I hesitated, but something in my gut told me to answer. "Hello. Elise." The voice was shaky, strained, older. "Yes, who is this?" This is Nurse Janice. I'm calling from St. Vincent's Hospital in Ashland." My heart dropped.
No. Please no.
"It's your father," she said gently. "He was brought in this evening. Cardiac incident. He's stable, but he's asking for you." I couldn't speak. "Elise? Did you hear me?" "Yes," I croaked. I heard you. He said you might not come, but he hopes you will." I hung up and stared at the screen, heart pounding. My father. The man who tried to buy my silence 2 weeks ago. The man who stole my trust fund. lied about my intentions, discarded me like a draft email. And now he was lying in a hospital bed, asking for me. I sat frozen for several minutes until Grandma Jean placed a hand on my shoulder. "You don't owe him anything," she said. "I know," I whispered. "But maybe I owe myself something." The next morning, I drove to Ashland. Not for him, not to fix anything, but to see with my own eyes the man who had shaped so much of my pain, and face him not as a daughter pleading for love, but as a woman who no longer needed it. The hospital was quiet,
Cold.
sterile. When I stepped into room 416, I saw him, pale, thinner, with tubes in his arm and oxygen hissing gently at his side. His eyes opened when I approached. "Elise," he rasped. "You came?" I stood at the foot of the bed. "I'm not here for reconciliation," I said. "Say what you need to say. I won't be back." His mouth quivered. "I was wrong."
Silence.
"I know I can't undo what I did, but I had to say it to your face. I was wrong. About how I treated you. About what you deserved. It wasn't an apology. Not really. But it was something." He swallowed. "I watched that video. I watched my daughter become a force. And I hated it because it proved everything I'd done didn't break you." My jaw tightened. "You don't get credit for not breaking me," I said. "But I accept your regret. That's all I needed." He closed his eyes. "Thank you for coming." I turned to leave, and didn't look back.
Because closure isn't about them.
It's about knowing you have nothing left to prove. 1 year later, I stood in front of a new building. It wasn't grand or towering. No marble columns. No engraved glass. But it was mine. Well, not literally. But it was my first completed project as part of the firm's Urban Systems Initiative, a community center designed for women re-entering education later in life. It had quiet study rooms, free childcare on site, and workstations tailored for women balancing laptops and bottles, books and burdens. I had helped design every inch of it, and I'd drawn it with her in mind. The girl I used to be, the one who studied in a car with frozen hands, who measured her meals by dollar bills, who dreamed of dignity more than diplomas. She wouldn't have believed we'd end up here. I turned as the ribbon cutting began, clapping politely as the mayor gave a speech about progress and innovation. But the real ceremony came later, when a young woman approached me after the crowd cleared. She held a baby on her hip and a tote bag full of notebooks. "Are you Elise Monroe?" she asked, eyes wide. "The engineer who gave that speech last year?" "I am," I said. She reached out, voice shaking. "Thank you. I saw that clip when I was deciding whether to go back to school. I was scared. But then I saw you. And I thought, maybe I don't have to be perfect. Maybe I just have to begin." I blinked hard, willing tears not to fall. "You're already doing the hard part," I said. "Beginning is everything." Grandma Jean passed away 6 months after the ribbon cutting.
Peacefully.
In her sleep, with a book open in her lap and the heater humming softly. She left me her house, her garden, and a handwritten letter I still haven't finished reading. Some things take time. At her memorial, Daniel stood beside me. He'd started consulting part-time for nonprofits, trying to apply his skills in more meaningful ways. He still had a lot to learn, but he was trying. We weren't best friends, but we were honest. And that meant something. My parents didn't attend the memorial. They sent flowers and a card that said, "With regret and remembrance." It wasn't enough, but I didn't need it to be. Because some wounds don't heal. They become scar tissue. Stronger.
Tougher.
A reminder not of the pain, but of the survival. Today, I teach 2 nights a week at a local college.
Intro to Systems Design.
It's not glamorous, but I love it. Especially when the students stay after class, asking about career paths or how to balance school and part-time work. Sometimes they ask about my past, how I did it. And I tell them, by refusing to let someone else write my story. Even when the pen was stolen, even when the page was torn, I kept writing. That's what this whole journey was. Not revenge, not even justice. Just a story reclaimed. A name made whole again. A life built, not from what I was given, but from what I deserved all along. If you've ever been the quiet one, the overlooked one, the one who is expected to carry it all with grace and say nothing, let this be your reminder. You are not invisible. You are not replaceable. And your voice, it matters. Thank you for listening to my story. If this resonated with you, leave a comment, share your journey, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this. Remember, your worth isn't defined by what others give you. It's defined by what you refuse to give up.